Woohoo!
Somebody start talking.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi, everybody. This is a panel that you've tuned into, and we're going to talk about some things. And specifically, we're going to talk about Branch Riders, which is a brand new game that's on Kickstarter right now. Love to have other eyes on it. We've got a great response so far, but we certainly please join us if you haven't had a chance to check it out on Kickstarter. We're going to tell you a little bit about it in this panel today. I'm Rich Thomas, founder and creative director of Onyx Publishing, and these three gentle people are people who actually have worked on the Branch Riders game.
Yeah.
They put words on, documents.
Hard at work chiseling in the word mines.
Yes.
You guys introduce yourselves.
I'll start. I am Eddie Webb. My pronouns are he, him. I am the in-house developer, one of the in-house developers at Onyx Path Publishing. I'm also the executive producer at Onyx Path Publishing, and I ended up being kind of the consulting developer, I guess, producer. I'm not sure what the correct place in the design team was, but I helped out with Branch Riders. How about you, Doug?
I'm Doug Hagler. I am on the board of the Bodhana Group and have been for like 8 years now, like a long time.
Yeah, about that.
And I am one of the writers and designers of Branch Riders.
Right. I am Jack Birkenstock Jr. I'm actually the executive director of the Bodhana Group. So thank you everybody for any kind of assist, help with all of the other fundraising and all that cool stuff that happens this weekend. You'll see me and I think Doug as well tomorrow in the Bodhana panel. But I am also one of the writers and designers and the project lead for the Branch Riders project. So yeah, great to be here and talk about this awesome game, which was funded in less than 8 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, super exciting.
There's still a lot of road to hoe, as they say in the word mines.
I always forget that you're a junior. That's for some reason. Whenever you give your full name, I'm
Like,
like,
it was very
he's a
important
junior.
for him to say that.
Yeah.
Like, there's other Jack Birkenstocks out there doing this sort of thing.
That's right.
But I'm the
of the many Jack Birkenstocks in the gaming industry.
Right.
I'm
the
the junior
that there were.
Right.
I am the one. Charles Emerson Winchester III.
Jack's dad wrote an entirely different tabletop RPG.
Yeah, he was more of a grognard. He wrote like a war game derived.
Yeah, that was Ranch Riders, which is all about people in the Old West who farmed ranches.
That's right.
Which inspired the Borderlands.
Of course, yeah.
Right.
Because he was also in a band. So,
Thanks, Dad.
So there we go. Yeah, all right. we're off to a great stop.
Mr. Birkenstock, we call him.
But yeah, I mean, for those of you who don't know, I mean, we've been talking about Branch Riders for a long time now. We've been kind of hinting at a lot, and we definitely wanted to make sure that it was as done can be and as complete can be before we did kind of the full announcement. We're talking about a lot of what the system offers, but it offers a lot. You take on the role of a Branch Rider, which is kind of like a special operations force, although it is not a military game, I guess we should say. And your job is you are tapped as a person that is able to see the enemy of the game, which is called the Blight, for what it really is, and that's a special gift. And you basically traverse the 8 distinct different realms, battling against the Blight using your talents, the members of your team as support, as well as special gifts that you bring from each realm. And each of those realms is designed after a genre. So, there's something at the table for everybody, whether you're into fantasy, steampunk, sci-fi, dystopian fiction, post-apocalyptic, Western, superhero. Like we have a genre for everybody in the game. So we're very excited. I mean, we've been talking a lot about it. Where do you think our biggest focus should be on this convo here?
Well, I mean, I assume a lot of people are here because they want to know kind of what the game's all about. So I mean, setting definitely is a good start to talk about it. But I mean, I make sure we have some time to talk about the system as well, because it is very different from the other kind of games that Onyx Path puts out.
Yeah, and I guess maybe one big thing to kind of let everybody know ahead, and we've talked a lot about this also, is that even though the Bodhana Group utilizes gaming for therapy, education, and skill building, I want to really highlight to everybody that this is not a therapy game. It was not designed purely as a therapeutic engagement. It was designed as a role-playing game that would proudly sit upon the shelf next to any other game that you're playing, and that it's driven also very strongly when we talk about mechanics, about the idea of it's very narrative driven. So it truthfully is all about telling a story. And virtually every part of the system is just about telling that evocative, engaging, exciting story, from when your character decides what they want to do, all the way down to the resolution, and even what the bad guys do, you know, like how the blight operates and what it does. All of the system components are designed around that storytelling idea. So Doug, you're kind of like the grand dame, if you will, of like mechanics discussion. Why don't you tell them about, you know, just how the characters do the things?
Yeah, and actually, before Doug, before you just start talking,
problem.
Jack, you're coming across very quiet, so maybe check your mic setting while Doug talks.
No one's ever said that to you before, but here we go.
Yeah,
I
that's
know,
a new
it
criticism
surprised
from
me.
Much
Jack.
no one has ever said that. Okay.
So yeah, mechanically, Branch Riders is a dice pool system. You'll be rolling 3 dice to accomplish most things, and those dice will be of your different types, basically everything but a D20. So a D4, D6, D8, D10, D12. Just because the D20 is a huge jump from D12 and didn't fit in the mix. And so if you're sitting at the table and you want your character to do something, the first thing you do is you pick your character's approach. How is your character going to try to accomplish whatever it is they're trying to do? And we have 5 approaches in the game: creative, forceful, observant, knowledgeable, and social. And so those are basically the ability scores, or the main abilities of this game. And then each of those has a die associated with it. The more sides the die has, the better you are at that thing. So a D12, you're a master. A D4, it mostly gets you into trouble. The next thing you pick is your technique. So you're either going to use a skill, which is just like your standard role-playing game skill list. There's like 11 skills. Or you're going to use your gift, which is an ability that comes from your home realm that you carry with you into the different realms. But it kind of reflects where you came from and the genre that your character represents, especially early on in the game. One of the things about the game is it's a multi-genre game. And so you can have characters from different genres interacting very much in kind of like a Into the Spider-Verse type situation, where you're all heroes, but you're different versions and different approaches of being a hero. And your gift could be anything from a magical ability to having been born rich to having a rocket that you can strap onto yourself. Like, the gifts are really broad. And probably my favorite part of the game was writing out all those gifts. And so the way the gifts interact is very narrative driven, and so it doesn't get too bogged down in mechanics. It's a bit more descriptive. And so you can have gifts from a fantasy setting and gifts from a sci-fi setting interact with each other without having like mashup problems that I've encountered in other games, where you're trying to be like, okay, this does this, but has this modifier, this has this modifier. We kind of avoid that sort of thing. The third die that you would pick up before you roll is your situation die. And that's based on your exposure. Basically, while you're in the realm trying to defeat the blight is also in the realm trying to get rid of you. And so the more the blight is aware of you, the worse it is for you. So if the blight isn't aware of you and things are going pretty well, you'll have a very nice situation die, like a D10, a D8, that's going to help you out. Once the blight becomes aware of you, the die starts dropping down to a D6 or a D4. Or if things go really bad, that die just goes away, and now you only roll 2 dice, which is a huge problem because of the resolution system. Basically, when you roll the 3 dice, every die that shows a 4 or higher counts as a success. So you can see like a D4 has a 25% chance of helping you. A D12 has like a 75% chance of helping you. So there's a big difference. If you roll 3 successes, roll successes on all 3 dice. That's like the critical success. You get what you want and you get something else cool. If you roll 2 successes on the dice, that's just a success. You get what you wanted. It worked. Move on. If you roll 1 success on the 3 dice, that's kind of the sweet spot where either you get what you want at a cost, so you make some sort of interesting choice, or you don't get what you want, but you get a bonus in some other way. You kind of fail forward, sort of like Indiana Jones. And then if you roll 0 successes, all 3 dice are under a 4, then that's kind of the critical fail. And not only do you not get what you wanted, but things get worse for you. One of the main goals that I had in designing the game is to never have a situation in the game where you roll the dice and nothing changes. 'Cause I hate when you roll the dice and you just miss, or you roll the dice and the monster makes its saving throw and your spell doesn't work. And you just like, oh, I guess I do nothing. Okay, whose turn is it next? I really don't like that situation in a game. And so we never have a result where you roll dice and nothing changes in the story. Every time you roll the dice, something changes, which just makes it a more fun game to play, I think.
Oh, more dynamic, certainly. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
good.
There's no whiffs.
Yeah, and even, I mean, Doug had mentioned the situation die earlier, which is drafted off of this exposure tracker, which is another kind of very unique mechanic that not only does the exposure tracker, just sit in the middle of the table. By design for the game, it's something that, every player has access to looking at. So it's literally as things are happening in the game. And, when we mentioned about the different gifts and the way that we can use them, there are essentially 4 different quote unquote levels, I guess, to the way that gifts are used. So one is you have a free use, which doesn't require a roll, but it's flavor, it's story, it's something that doesn't really affect the way that combat or action or whatever is going on. But it's kind of like a cute, my character uses his gift to do this. Like if I have a little support bot, which is one of the gifts, maybe I'll be using it to entertain children. Doesn't affect anything in gameplay, but it allows your character to extend themselves a little in the use of that gift. When you start to use it at the levels that, again, we didn't want to bother with range and mechanics and stuff for that. So we kept it, again, very accessible, very good and easy narrative, which was you're either using it on yourself, you're using it on one other person, or you're using it against the world or like an area effect. So even though there are descriptors, again, in the final book, where you're going to see like, oh, the power kind of looks like this when I use it at another, be creative. And, players are encouraged to go, oh, well, if I have an elasticity power, like from the superhero realm, think of how many different ways Reed Richards alone has used an elasticity power in the comics over the decades, right? So it allows the player to do this. But the interesting thing is we built in for this exposure tracker to also be kind of like a, yo, time's running out. Like you're on a mission. You don't have time to lollygag. Yes, I'm using old terms. But so when you go to use a world gift, that automatically stages your exposure by 1. So it automatically moves it up by 1, but those powers can affect great change. So there's like a little bit of risk reward built into there. But I think also very compelling is you see the impact of your changes as you're playing. So to me, it's a lot better than, well, I knocked him down 7 hit points and he has 37 left or something like that. It's, I did this and this is how it affected the situation and the gameplay. And yeah, so that resolution system alone, I like that someone in here made the comparison that it is similar but different to the Sentinels Comics RPG, which uses kind of that, comic book pacing of, yeah, it starts out really kind of calm and then it kind of stages up and gets really dramatic and then, kind of denouement, etc. So that's a good comparison. But yeah, that's another one of the cool things. And actually one of our stretch goals is to fully realize and design a like cardboard or thicker exposure tracker that will be out on the table.
Absolutely. And actually, the exposure tracker is kind of one of my favorite bits of the game, because it could have been, and for a while, I think it was initial designs, purely a set of rules, a game device, right? A way to kind of show the players, hey, things are getting more dangerous. The blight, which are the big antagonists, the settings are getting more powerful, and whatnot. And of course, it changes, as we said, the exposure die. But the fact is that it's actually diegetic. The fact that the characters in the world have devices that show them what the exposure is, so that they can have in-character conversations about the actual mechanics of the game that doesn't
Yeah.
cause any kind of it's okay, it's legal, if you will, to talk about these things inside the game as characters, and it allows you to subtly push people who may be a little more reticent to roleplay kind of slightly back into character and say, why don't you discuss that as your character? Why don't you discuss that as a
Right.
team? And because it's so central to the game, it's always a kind of a very, very mild push back towards, let's talk about that. What does that mean to you? How do your characters feel about that? And also you could do things like, I'm going to use my world power, and the other characters try to talk you out of it because they know what's going to happen on that thing. It's a very, it sounds simple, but it actually is an extremely elegant bit of design that I've always really loved about the game.
Yeah, and well, and there, I mean, going along also like kind of with that, talking about things that are, diegetic. That's my new word, Eddie. Thank you. You just added
You're welcome.
to my
It's a good
vocab
word.
today. But our condition system. I mean, I mentioned the whole idea of hit points and stuff a little bit earlier, but we don't have those in Branch Riders because again, it's mechanical, it bogs down. So our condition cards is kind of our quote unquote damage mechanic. And this is honestly one of my favorite parts of the system, because in this game, you don't get damage that is done in stats. You get damages that are conditions. And what we did is we originally, oh my God, what do we have, like 18 different conditions?
Yeah.
We had a lot of conditions.
It was unyielding.
We had way too many.
But we eventually pared it down and we figured, okay, in a role-playing game, there are different things that happen, like your character gets damaged, they get hurt. Well, when you get hurt, that could mean that you're physically hurt. But in a game where you're interacting with different like social engagement, and we also have things like emotional magic and things like that. So you can be hurt in a variety of different ways. You can be hurt socially, you can be hurt mentally, What we did was when you take damage, whether it is from an attack or an action or a power of the blight, you receive a condition card that is apropos of what the situation is. And even then, it is not narratively constrained at all. It is very open-ended that you're interpreting that in the light of what happens in the game. So there's basically 3 different types of conditions. One of which we call an edge, which are your positive conditions. These are things like whether you're encouraged, prepared, strengthened. And again, that could mean I'm wearing armor, so I'm strengthened. Or if your table wants, they could say, well, I have armor, so I'm prepared for battle. Hey, it's up to your table and your interpretation. We wanted it to remain very fluid and very to, what's going on. So we also then have a basic condition, which are what we call the yellow cards. And that basically means that whatever that condition stands for, anytime you try to attempt an action that involves that, you roll a D4 for your situation die, regardless of what the exposure tracker, because you, the character, are impacted. And the card is designed on the character sheet to basically slot into 2 little slot areas that are at the top of the sheet. An advanced condition basically means whatever the thing was, let's say your leg was injured in battle. Well, you can't run, you can't leap, you can't jump, because now you have an advanced condition or a red card, right? So the idea is, as a player, if you can stage up a basic to an advanced, if the combat's progressing, or if you're just getting that much thrown at you, that you have 2 red cards. You're not dead. You're not like completely out. You're just unable to actively participate in the combat at that level. You could still speak. You can still contribute to the narrative. But the thing that really kind of drives me wild about it is these cards are color-coded and they're visual, and they sit on your character sheet facing the middle of the table. So as a player, not only do I see the exposure tracker out there and I see like, oh my gosh, we're like at exposure level 7, we're close to being boned here. I'm also seeing, and as I look around the table, I see an awful lot of red here. This is not a good sign, gang. So
Right.
it then provides an impetus in cyber at a glance. You can look around and know how the team is doing, which adds, even though it's very narrative, it adds a very good storytelling based strategic element of how you manage your resources as a squad and as a team, because there are a lot of gifts that will get rid of conditions. There are a lot of gifts that will grant edges. And that, again, just, like we said, the whole system is designed around the idea of let's tell a moving, engaging story that is, just ever forward. And
Right.
those condition cards are just so great.
I also
Well,
love
it
the
provides
element.
an audio visual connection around the table that affects you in the real world, which is always, we were telling these stories and they're all up in our heads and stuff like that. But if we're also getting impetus to do something because we're seeing something in the real world, in this case, as you said, a table of a lot of red,
Right.
that is very, very strong for the whole group to be playing and realize me, Bob, who's playing character, Bob, Johnny McGee, that Johnny McGee's in trouble. So's the rest of the group because Bob is looking at the table. And so we're blending that a little bit more, I think, in a strong, really fun gaming way.
Branch
And-
Riders, we made meta okay.
And yeah, you can. So I really like that you can just naturally talk about what's happening to your character
Yep.
using regular language. There's no question of like, how are you doing? Well, I'm down 17 hit points out of 40. Like, okay, cool. Well, what is that? We can say, oh,
Right.
I'm wounded, and the wound is my arm, and that means I can't use my weapon until we deal with this. Oh, and you can talk about that at the table
Must have
in a
blacked
meta sense,
out.
but also in the game. Help, I'm wounded, right?
Right.
And I
Yeah.
just,
I'm hurt and I'm scared. I mean,
right, yeah,
those
I'm
are
hurt, I'm
meaningful
frightened, I'm
conversation.
isolated, I'm depleted, whatever, use different terms, but
I'm
like,
provoked.
It's
right,
like
I'm
this stack
so
of
mad.
conditions on top of the character that everybody can see going, whoa, he's pretty messed up.
Right, yeah. Or he's so completely obsessed with this thing he's angry about, we have to hold him back because he has this red card. I really like that connection that we can talk about what we're looking at on the table and on our character sheets in the game, and it's not contrived. It's relatively natural, which is just great. Also good for new players that, if you're asking like, how's your character? Oh, my character's hurt. Perfect. That makes perfect sense. Everyone knows what that means. Whereas if my character, has some levels of injury, you might be like, what does that mean? What does that look like?
Right.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that this does is like when you say my character's hurt, you have the audio visual. Look at that right
Yeah.
there, showing that there's a problem. But there's also the way that it's just it's not just hurt. Well, I could be hurt and still like as we know from the classic, I could have 1 hit point and I could still do as much damage and still just be just as much of a badass as if I had 100 hit points.
Right.
Where in this case, hurt actually does mean, yeah, you're not doing as well. You're not able
Yeah.
to do the same sort of thing you could do if you
I can move around, but I'm limping.
Right.
It shows.
Yeah, and the other thing I like about this also is because some games go the opposite route, where it's like, okay, I've hit an arbitrary number, and so therefore all my dice pulls are harder. And that's just as bad for different reasons. Whereas again, because this is all a narrative, it becomes very logical. It's like, okay, I'm hurt because I'm limping, like Doug said. So if I'm using a gun, that doesn't really impact
Right.
my role. So
I can limp and
that's
shoot
not
all
valid.
day. Yeah.
Right, exactly. But if I'm trying to run away from somebody, obviously that's going to impact that, and so I'm gonna have a penalty. So they become again, it encourages players to think tactically, but not tactically on the abstract rule system, but tactically inside the world. So it's like, okay, we can't run away from this guy because Bobby's hurt. And you can have that conversation in character as
Right.
opposed to okay, out of character, I have this many hit points and you have this. We should no, you can in character talk about that. So again, like it for especially for newer players, I've discovered, having run this for some new players now over the past few years, not this game, but other games, that sometimes when you talk about rules, it's easy to kind of step out and then it's hard to step back in. And but that barrier is just gone when you can just have, there's just nothing stopping you from having these conversations in character. Again, like, what kind of gifts do you have? Oh, well, I have a cyber arm and I have an AI buddy. These are all things, nothing is really stopping you from just saying everything in character. So there's very little abstracted information. There's very little information that's opaque to the characters. So like Dak says, I mean, you're making meta okay, but also it's because it's really collapsing those two layers of gameplay, which for not only new players, but also new game masters is really, really helpful.
And I think that, going back just a second, because I do want to also talk about the settings, because, a lot of folks, they might see the art or they might see the description or even knowing our background and go like, this seems like a very soft game, like in terms of like, it's very happy-go-lucky kind of a thing. But, the level of depth that's in this system, even from when we talk about those 5, and Doug, you're much better at the math conversation when we do this, but so, on surface, you have 5 approaches, right? And let's say you're only using your skills. You have 11 different skills to choose from. So you have different combinations, right? Where you could combine any one of those approaches with any of the number of skills. So if I want to break the bad guy's machine, that would be a forceful tools roll that I would be making. Or if I'm, trying to make explosives, well, that could be a knowledgeable science roll because I'm trying to make it, or it could be a forceful science roll because I'm trying to make dynamite, or
or if you're MacGyvering, it could be creative and tools to put together to make I'm gonna make this blow up, these things in this custodian closet.
I need a paperclip.
Right? Yeah.
Give me that gum you're chewing.
Right. Exactly.
That guy's leg.
I definitely need that guy's leg. But even beyond that, though, is now, yes, you have the straight up, I can add this with this and insert result here, but it also encourages, because the player's personality and the way that they play, like so many creative uses of how to combine those two, because we give you plenty of examples in the player section, which, by the way, for those watching and those watching this later, backers do already now have access to chapter 1 of the Branch Rider's manuscript. So you can read through the player section, which is talking about all this stuff with the mechanics that we're talking about and basically how to play, and sneak peek, because it was already in an update. Every Friday during the campaign, we're going to be releasing another chapter. And the way that we've structured it is that by the end of the campaign, you're going to have everything you will need to play a game of Branch Riders at your table. You will have the player section, you'll have the list of gifts that are available to all characters, you'll have the GM section, and you'll have at least one realm guide that will show you each breakdown section that we provide in the final book that will tell you about a realm, which includes your people, your places, your events, as well as story starters, because our goal is we want to, get you off and running. But I think the other really cool discovery we had, and we've already had chat in the Discord, which please talk about Branch Riders if you're a backer. And
or ask questions. Yeah.
Manuscript. Oh my gosh. The creative plus weird skill check is probably one of my other favorite inventions that we threw in, which, hey, GM, do you ever have a situation where a player suggests something they want to do and you have no idea where the heck to put that in terms of what their role is? Well, now you do.
We have a role for
Creative
that.
plus weird.
Yeah, roll creative plus weird. Because I don't know what you're trying to attempt. It doesn't fit with anything else. Or if a player is stumped and they don't know what to do, they could just, it's literally the ultimate go-to of what you could roll to make an attempt. So.
I think it's really useful. As you said, sometimes while you're coming up with ideas, you're trying to solve a problem while you're playing. To step back and go, now mechanically, let me think, what would I use for this? Blah, 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 can kill your impetus. If you can just say, I'm doing creative plus weird.
Right.
Blah, let's just go rock and roll.
Yeah.
I think that allows the narrative to flow a lot better as you're playing and keep people engaged in what's happening and whatever kind of drama you're putting in there.
Yeah. And I would say that, also going back to something that I kind of foretold, I mean, I'm trying to think, just there's so many cool mechanics, even the way the blight works themselves. Because when you folks get your hands on either the final book or that chapter of each realm guide, we provided you with blights in the realm guides that typically things that will show up in that realm. And the blight isn't just creatures, it just isn't monsters. The blight is a force, it's not a being. So it infects people and it makes bad situations worse, is kind of a way that we like to describe it. So if you're in the superhero realm of the Heights, maybe you are a superhero that's not as popular on Capebook, which is the social media app in the Heights, as another superhero. Well, the blight finds that jealousy and that rage and goes, oh, you're really jealous. You really want to give this guy what for. So that blight now has infected this citizen, and this person has superpowers. So yeah, that's a bad deal. And that's the setting for a mission for branch riders. It's so many different things. But then the way the blight works is blight have powers, which are guided off of a directive, which is basically the goal of the blight. Like, what is the blight's goal? Which makes it also easy for a new GM or a GM new to branch riders on how to play the bad guy. Because it's what's your motivation for this scene could probably have been a tagline for this game now that I think about it. But when those powers activate, those are called shots. So when the blight engages in a power, it basically will say the player must make this approach plus this skill defense check. And it uses the same resolution system with the yes and the yes, with the 4 or higher for successes. So again, we're not reinventing. We have one wheel and it rolls darn good. So with this, you will have players that only can have 10 active skills in their array, but there are 11 skills to choose from. So the blight may hit you where it hurts. And we wanted combat to have kind of some of those unsuspecting surprises when you're in combat. Like, you're not always prepared for the way an enemy is going to go at you. And so that's another kind of mechanical thing where, there's a little bit of teeth to this system, just in the way that goes. And then when you get the final book, there's a whole chapter about creating your own blight, creating your own gifts, creating your own powers for the blight, which are also, if you want to learn that process firsthand while you're a backer and supporting the project, those are some of our special levels that some have taken advantage of, where you can create a blight that will be in the final book. You will help create gifts that will be in the final product. Those are all advanced backer levels that, again, just helps this project be the most successful version of itself that it could possibly be. What do you think about the darkness in the settings, Doug? You're kind of one of the wand waving maestros there of making these worlds real, not just cartoonish skill build opportunity.
They spent some time like that.
I do art in this world.
I like the flexibility, and part of this is that we're building. Well, part of it is that it's you and me as key people in this project. And you and I just have different approaches on how to create a story and on how to create a setting. And different, but it's also because we're creating, like, this game isn't created as a therapeutic role-playing game. It's created as a fun role-playing game that has a lot of applicability for therapeutic use. And one of those things is that, I had in mind, like, I'm usually gaming with people about my age, adults with, sometimes brutal, dark senses of humor. So that's where my mind goes with a setting. So I'm always thinking, how do we make this worse? How do we make this conflict more pointed? You're often playing in therapeutic groups with, like, kids and teenagers, which is a different context, right? And so I like that each of our realms is built so that you're happy and I'm happy. So that, like, you can run it as a relatively lighthearted romp through a goofy situation, solving problems, like Scooby and the gang. And that works for, like, what you're doing. That's perfect. And there's also the things in each of the realms that I can be interested in and run the exact same realm with the exact same mechanics, the exact same game for a bunch of jaded adults, who want to tell a heart-wrenching story about, fighting the long defeat against fascism. And we have support for both of those things where you can look at the realms and go, yeah, these are great. I can use this. And I can look at the realms and go, yeah, this is great. I can use this.
Yeah.
Because there's that flexibility in them. But yeah, that was one of my goals, is to make sure that, like, because I was pushing things in a certain direction, but my goal was not to push them so far that, like, Jack is like, this makes me sad.
Yeah.
You know?
No,
Right.
it's
Thanks,
it's
thanks,
doable
Doug.
to do that. It's got the range to enable you to go whatever direction you need to go at it with your table, what kind of stories you want to tell.
Right.
Um,
It doesn't tell you this is a horrible grimdark setting. It doesn't tell you this is a goofy bonk you on the head setting, but it has room for both.
Yeah.
And in the way
Yeah.
the game's designed,
well, I
where
mean,
the
like,
focus isn't on fighting necessarily.
what
there's
is
lot-
the
Go
what is
ahead.
what is the realm with the noir and
The
The
burrows.
burrows.
the burrows, right? So you got the burrows, and it's noir, but it's with anthropomorphized animals, and it's a wild mashup to put in there, but it actually makes a lot of sense. And if you wanted to play that, much more all about animal people running around in a kind of a 1930s 40s street scene sort of thing, you could do that, or you could play it very noir. And one of the things about that is, like, in a lot of the noir writing, like
Mhm.
the Raymond Chandler books, stuff like that, very often people are described in relating them to animals.
Yeah.
So, like,
This gorilla walks up to me, you know.
right, this weasel, the he squinted and he had just gave me a look like a human rat. I mean, that happened all the time in a lot of the old pulp things. And so, while it seems like just this mashup, it actually makes a lot of sense to enable you to be able to go from one thing to the next, depending on how you want to play it.
Yeah.
And I
with
think
the-
a lot of that was done incredibly smartly in this in when you guys put this thing together.
in the burrows, like you just said, you could run like the Maltese Falcon in that.
Except it's a real
realm.
falcon.
Yeah.
That'd be a great. Oh my gosh, we should. Okay, we should write that.
You could run Who Framed Roger Rabbit in that setting. You could
Yeah.
even
Well,
run
I think that's
Zootopia
yeah.
in that setting. Right there is 3 different levels of a story you could run just in one realm.
Yeah.
You know.
Mhm.
What is your I guess there's a good question. What's your favorite realm, Doug? Having trod the boards through all 8, technically 9, because you do have the Nexus, your new home / headquarters.
Right.
You could dodge this one too, Doug, because people are always asking, "What's your favorite X, Y, or Z?" And it's like,
Right.
come on, I made these things.
Of course,
no,
of course,
did
I
ask
love.
the lame question on our own panel?
No, you're
Yeah, you
good.
did.
It's of course
Yeah.
I love all my children.
Right.
But
But one of them you love more.
The one, and there's things I love about each of them,
Mark.
obviously. But there's also, like, I mean, honestly, there's ones I like more or less. There's sometimes I'd sit down and be like, okay, we got to fill this in, or sometimes I'm sort of psyched about it. I'm gonna say actually the Burrows is probably my favorite.
Wise
I-
guy.
Because I like the mashup of anthro animals and kind of noir neo-futurism. I like the idea of, like, this city that you can't escape. That and when I run a game in a city, I like to have really vivid neighborhoods. So, like, you make a city into a world by having each neighborhood be like a different sort of
Country.
subsetting, right?
Right.
But instead of the kind of the usual ethnic breakdown of big cities often have, you have an animal type breakdown. So, like, you have a neighborhood that's all nocturnal animals, so it lights up at night. You have a neighborhood that's all animals that can fly, so it's only reachable by animals that can fly. You have a neighborhood that's with, huge herbivores that like to wallow in the mud. And so it's gross unless you're one of those types of people, and it's the best place in the whole world. And I love the idea of, like, a hard-bitten detective going, like, I would love to write the story of, like, a detective going from neighborhood to neighborhood, investigating something and having to deal with these wildly various kinds of people. without having to make it into like a nationality thing, because that's
Right.
fraught, right? That's
Which
how you
we
depict
also
different
avoided.
nationalities can be fraught.
And we
But
had some conversations about that during
we
this.
did, we absolutely
we
did.
did.
Yeah. It,
Yep.
it crept in and had to be cut off, rightly so. But like it's a cool way of having a wild diversity of ways of life, of ways of, everyday living, but still being kind of fantastical.
More like biomes, really. Then
Yeah, they're kind of like, and how does a neighborhood adapt to a group of people who have similar animal abilities?
Right.
And I just really like that depiction, and that, the creativity that's built into the boroughs, with the diversity of neighborhoods, but also you can fall back on noir tropes if you want to.
Right. Yeah.
And those are noir tropes are kind of clear. They're kind of easy to grasp, I feel like.
a giraffe walked in.
Yeah, right.
His legs went forever.
Yeah, right. That giraffe's legs go all the way up
Way up.
to like the second floor.
Strange enough.
So yeah, I would say, I mean, I love them all, but like if I had to pick one right now, it'd be the boroughs. How about you, Jack?
And why is it the Heights?
No, actually, surprises, it is.
It's
I
not the Heights.
actually,
Wow.
I don't know. For me, it's definitely a toss up, but I have to say that I really like the chain, which is, and now I'm not a steampunk fan necessarily, but in the steampunk realm, which we call the chain, named so because it's a chain of archipelagos, like just different islands.
It's an island chain. Yeah.
Yeah, and some are in the water. There are a couple of flying islands because of the tech. And the reason I like that realm is because it's one of the only realms really in which they kind of know of the blight in a way. They basically, there's this force called the Steel Imperium, and they're taking over everything. It's just like this mechanized automaton army, but they discovered blight energy in that realm, and they call it Tenebris. And they use it to pilot all of their robots, all of their airships, all of their, everything that they're doing. And while all this is going on, so you have this, fight for freedom and this resistance fighting against the Imperium. You also have these islands, and there's this mysterious fog, this cloud that is on the edges of the realm. Islands get swallowed up, and it's not like, Frogger, where it like disappears from this side and it comes out the other. It's this island, like there's an island coming, and we haven't read these signatures for over 100 years. What's on that island? So you can tell like Indiana Jones or Alan Quatermain style stories, where if you want to do like jungle kind of adventure in a steampunk setting, like I love that idea of also like they're so close to knowing the nature of the blight, which is also a system conceit of the people in the realms. One, the realms aren't connected to each other. You can't walk from the boroughs to the heights. They are separated by a barrier that we call the curtain. How did they get separated? We're not quite sure. Or in another way of saying it, we didn't want to tell you. You can come up with your own lore on that, because only one answer would not have been satisfactory. So there's so many different ways to kind of interpret that. But that means that once you're tapped as a branch rider, you can never go home, because the energy that you take with you, like coming back and going, hey, where the heck were you for like 5 years while you're branch riding? You see, what happened was
I had a cold.
right, but also now, because of those realms being separated, if I'm from the heights and I go to the boroughs, the blight already is like, wait a minute, what is this? Because that's why exposure gets stripped when you use gift. Ironically so, if you're in your home realm and you're using a gift, like if you're from the borderland and you're using a borderland gift, yeah, that's natural to the realm because that's where it came from. But also, you can't tell people that you're a branch rider. You can't tell the citizens about the blight, because that increases the panic, that increases the blight's ability to tear the curtain, which is what the blight wants to do. It wants to rip the curtain down between all realms and just cause mass chaos.
Cats and dogs
Yeah,
living together.
not that the curtain doesn't tear on occasion, and you might find people from one realm stranded in another, which is also another story that can be told. You know, fish out of water isn't just for the branch riders, that's also for the citizenry. So yeah, again, so many different cool things that can happen. But yeah, that's a very long way to say I like the chain.
It is a cool. I really like the kind of stories I like telling in the chain are about the very human impulse where we don't understand something and so we weaponize it. And so like the
Yeah.
reason the Steel Imperium is so effective is because it's weaponizing the blight and turning it into, you know, blight powered automatons and blight powered ships.
Yeah.
And to the Steel Imperium, they're like, this is infinitely renewable energy. This is incredible. We'll conquer everything.
We'd be fools not to use it.
Right.
Yeah,
If
right.
we don't use it, someone else, our
Fools.
enemies will.
Mm.
And I like telling that very human story of like, on some level, you know, if you can find a way to stop them from doing that, that's the only way to save the realm long term. And so you have to convince people not to use a power that they've found, which is like a huge challenge. And also, you know, comes up in life sometimes. Because it's a very human thing to like the first thing we do with a new thing is make weapons out of it and then later realize what a terrible idea that was. And I like that as an allegory for a bunch of other things in
Yeah, I mean,
history and in life.
it was we have rogue AIs, we have the impact of social media, we have, you know, the athletic performance and competition in the rails,
Yeah,
like
PEDs, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of real, like the one post in one of the Monday morning minutes where people are like, whoa, you guys are talking about like, you know, the dangers of this and that like ahead of time. And it's like, yeah, we have a finger on the pulse pretty far back, I would say. So, you know, you could tell those real world ripped
It
from
was
the
AI,
headlines
wasn't
kind of
it?
stories. Yeah, Depto in the terminal, or sci-fi I guess we would say dystopian, like it's like look at any scene from the Terminator in the future. That's kind of what the terminal looks like.
Yeah.
What
Um,
what about you, Eddie? Or
uh,
any other things you want to highlight? Because I notice we're running out of time because Jack does go on.
yeah. Well,
We were counting on it, Jack.
Yeah, you're here to
Uh,
go on.
I just want to say real quick. Well, one person's already done this, but if other people in the chat, if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, and I will try my best to shoehorn them in if Jack will let me. But I will say you mentioned the rails, and that's actually one of my favorites because similar to what you're saying about the other ones, on the surface it's like it's an anthro setting where everyone's into extreme competitions in a very 90s style with backwards baseball caps and brightly colored clothes. Um, and
Gucci.
it's and yeah, and it's like, okay, so the what? But then you find out it's a post-apocalyptic setting, and the fact that there's a lot of you know, very Hunger Games vibes or Mad Max Thunderdome vibes to it, and it gets pretty deep into things like how competition, too much competition can ruin your life, and then both the positive community building elements of competition and also the destructive elements of competition, and it gets to things like focusing too much on leaderboards and, you know, performance enhancements and all of that. It again, like all of these settings have a surprisingly deep well of stories that can be very Saturday morning cartoon, or can be very kind of, you know, image comic book, you know, or Netflix drama. I mean, it's I'm continually impressed at how well your team has managed to cram 9 really compelling worlds all into one book in a very small space.
Yeah, one of the therapists that works for us, he's been running branch riders in a therapeutic setting for over 9 months, and he did a story in the rails, and it zinged with one of the clients because the juice, which was the animal DNA inspired performance enhancement drink, that caused the feral, which are it's kind of like the zombie apocalypse version in our world. Like it was very impactful for clients who had family members with drug addiction issues.
Yep.
So you can tell a lot of those. What is it we always say? The Last of Us, sponsored by Red Bull or something like that. Yeah,
Red Bull presents The Last of Us.
yeah.
That's the rails.
That is the right. But my favorite part about the rails is the matchups. where because of competition, there's so many leaderboards, people are always trying to like strive themselves forward, but so they invent new sports. And you're encouraged in the book, make what's the mash in your realm, take two sports, comedically combine them, which weirdly is why basketball is one of the like inferences for this realm of like
Right.
inspiration.
Yeah.
But
Chess boxing.
my favorite is par scotch, which actually, if you look at our one of our main images for the campaign in our Kickstarter art, it is the branch riders gleefully playing a game of par scotch, which is parkour hopscotch. So you see numbers tagged up on the walls and stuff. Meanwhile, they have no idea that they are being chased in the background by three feral, which are the anthropomorphic creatures who are trying to hunt them down. So yeah, that's another little thing, because I love the silly mashups that you could do. So
Yeah, totally.
yeah, yeah, we had one question which was already answered, that there are 8 distinct settings. However, we didn't invent everything, and there's even rules and considerations in the book on making the game yours, where if you are like, hey, where's your Gothic realm? Make a 9th realm.
Where's
There's
your sword and
always-
sandals? Yeah.
yeah, there's
yeah.
always new things to discover, and there's guidelines on what considerations you'll have to construct those. And we're really excited, as we already have been, with the people that have play tested it, beta play tested it for us. Again, this game has been play tested well over 3 years by varying alpha and beta groups. And just the wild stuff that people come up with in the adventures, like you will not be without ideas with branch riders. There's plenty of stories to tell in the realms.
Yeah.
Very
And,
easy
I
to
mean-
reskin these realms as well. Just
Right.
you know.
And the thing is that, like you can run it in a Doctor Who World of the Week setting where you go in, you have one adventure in a realm and leave and never really come back. But I'm serious when I say, like, each of these realms could run an entire campaign all by itself if you really wanted to. Even though there's not a lot of word count given to each of them, there's enough implied depth and texture there. Each of them has a really compelling problem that needs to be solved that's not easily solved. And so even if you ran just a few sessions in each realm, you have a nice long campaign just with the material in the book. But on top of that, yeah, there's also some guidance on, either in this book or a cover book, I forgot where we landed on that, but like, how to build your own realms, how to build your own gifts, and all of that stuff.
Yep.
So, and because as Doug said, so much of the stuff's narrative, mechanically speaking, it's super easy to reskin, even on the fly, right? It's like,
absolutely.
I want to have magic tattoos that make me stronger. Okay, well, there's a strength gift in one of these other realms, so we'll give you that, but we'll say it's magic tattoos instead. Done.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that was very intentional. And just so people can kind of imagine these realm guides in the core book, they're short. Like, these are not 50-page realms. Really, when we present a realm, we're presenting one setting in that realm, like a few locations, an area, a town, a starting point.
Yeah, some people.
There's some people, some history for that place, so that you can drop an adventure in with very little effort right off. Crack open the book, start. But there's a whole realm that we're not describing in detail that you can drop your own setting that you like, your own tropes that you like, into each of these realms and expand them. So yeah, you could have a campaign in one realm, because you could easily bring stuff in and add it to the realm based on the genre. And you could also create, since we chose 8 genres, but there are more than 8 genres in the world of stories. So you could,
no, these are the only 8 stories that can ever be told.
That's right. There's more than 8
That's
genres.
all you get.
You might have your own narrow favorite. And so we have guidelines and advice and examples on how to build your own realm, add it to the 8, and the branch riders discover a 9th realm. There's no reason it's not there. They just haven't found it yet.
Yeah.
But one thing I really like because we've revised the realm guides many times, probably more than anything else in the book.
Yeah.
True.
Every time I was revising it, what was in my mind was to cut everything that wouldn't be useful at the table immediately.
Yep.
That every historical event is an adventure. Every character is an adventure. Every prop, to make sure that everything. So if you scan a page, it should inspire multiple ideas for a story. And then it's kind of up to you at your table to expand on that and turn it into your whole story. as opposed to like a, coloring in our thing or connecting our dots.
Yeah.
Um,
And I guess like with our time, we don't have a ton of questions and stuff. So, but I did want to say, thanks. We got at least one back during the convo. So welcome aboard. I guess just to kind of give, I guess, our final push before we do outros and stuff, right? So the campaign is live. We'll be going until July 11th. The very simple backing level is 25 for just the basic book. Now, it is in PDF form on its own, but that provides you with a coupon to order your hardcover POD book through DriveThruRPG. We also then have a level that is 30, which is you get the Facilitator's Guide along with the core book, again with the same coupons. The condition cards we mentioned are also going to be done as print-on-demand options as well. And I think
Facilitator's Guide being...
Oh, yes. Facilitator's Guide is not a GM guide. We want to make sure that folks know that. The Facilitator's Guide is a guide that if you're using this for either educational, therapeutic, or skill building uses. So parents, you can teach good social skills and anger management, not clinically, but like how to get along with others kind of games with your kids. And the Facilitator's Guide is designed for teachers, parents, and therapists on how to tweak the system. We're not going to teach you therapy, and we always acknowledge you do not perform therapy without the proper credentials, experience, training, and supervision, right?
and this book won't teach you to do therapy even poorly. It's not. It's a resource for people who already have the skills to apply those skills through branch riders.
Right.
It does actually have a bunch of GM advice.
But
it's GM advice aimed at intentional gaming with intention, gaming with a particular goal in mind, a particular purpose, whether it be education or skill building or therapy.
I know a lot of us like to game without intention.
Right. You don't need
as a relief because we're intent the rest of the day.
Yep.
We want to do that. So it's good to say that, Branch Riders is fully capable of being with intention and just as a fun time, as a good game with a lot of fun or with your friends, and you don't have to think of any of the underpinnings or the experience of the people writing it, who obviously have varying degrees and certificates and such in therapeutic training.
Right. Goal number one, a fun game that is at least as fun as the other games I'm looking at on my shelf right now, and it is. And then goal under that were some goals about it being useful and flexible for therapeutic use. And there's a lot in there. If you do use games therapeutically, there's a ton that you're going to be like, oh, I see what you did there. I see what's going on here.
And that's what the Bodhana Group is all about.
That's our thing.
It's the the offshoot of that, and also the idea that whatever funding comes through this, remember sales come through this, while there's certainly the making of and the payments for things like art and freelance things and stuff like that, the rest of the income that's coming in is going to be going into Bodhana, so helping to continue the mission.
Well, and speaking of the mission, one of the other levels of backing, I know I can't go through every single one of them. Please check out the Kickstarter. There's a great video that explains a lot of what we talked about, but there's a level. If you back at $45, basically you not only get the game for yourself, but you also will grant a copy of Branch Riders to another organization that works with children and teens specifically. So not only are you getting the gifted game for your table, but you're also giving it to an agency that is going to benefit others. And then, as I mentioned, you could check it out there. We have tons of great options of how you can actually contribute to the book, whether it's a character art, whether it's naming an NPC, designing a blight, like I said before. Some of my other favorites are levels where you can play with the designers. So either myself, Doug, or Bonnie, if you are hanging on, I believe today, we are running our first of 2 actual plays this weekend. Dork Tales is today at 12:30 p.m. Tomorrow, Bonnie will be running a second different actual play over at Plastic Age Plays. So again, check your Onyx schedule for the con this weekend. But we have a ton of great options, and
sign up for Bonnie's game. She's She
incredible.
loves Branch Riders. She worked on it.
Yeah.
She's been
Deeply
on the
immersed in
team,
it.
and
Just
she's
absolutely
good. And she's
fantastic.
good at running games. Like,
The chain, that's Bonnie. Like Bonnie wrote the chain.
yeah,
Like
Yeah.
the Steel Imperium was her idea, and it was incredible. So
and the Crags.
yeah, and
Yeah.
oh, that's right.
The Crags were like, yeah,
Yeah.
Heavy Bonnie, especially Argatho. Know
and
how-
her hand in everything else in the book. She's been on, on
Yeah,
our
as a young
innumerable
designer,
calls. And
this is her first game. I mean, it's my first game, but she's a young designer who's very good promise. And yeah, please back the project. It means a lot to us. And it'll mean a lot to your table when you get it there. It's a great system that we think you're all going to love. And again, backers now have access to chapter 1 every Friday, new chapter. So please read that manuscript and get the chatter going in the Discord server and online. Tell your friends, and let's get more people into the realms. Because
yeah, even if you don't back it, please share it. Just hit share.
Yeah, or support it just because you love the project. Every little bit helps to making it as robust as we envision it, and to really making it stand out.
Like the worst case scenario is you'll help people experience therapeutic gaming who need it. Like that's the worst that could happen in this situation, which is pretty freaking awesome. So,
Indeed.
And it's a really good game.
Awesome. Cool. So we're out of time. So again, please check out the Kickstarter if you haven't already. But otherwise we will be back here in about half an hour for
What's up?
channel What's Up with Onyx Path. So
What's
if you want to get an overview of what's happening with Onyx Path, hang out, come back here in about 30 minutes. Otherwise we'll see you all then. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.